breakout session on organizing a range of mass demonstrations we had during the Vietnam War. And I wrote Barbara an email note, was it last night? 2 nights ago. And I just share this as a problem, not of old age, but of reality. If you're looking for details, maybe Barbara has them. I think we have scattered memories. And I told her that when I went to Europe for the first time in 1951 for a pacifist youth conference in Helsingør, Denmark, all of these years later, I cannot remember one single thing about that conference. I can remember the pastries in Copenhagen. I can remember Tivoli Garden. I can remember the damage in the German cities. I can remember Paris. I can remember London. But I cannot remember a single thing about the conference for which I was sent. So memory has gaps. We will do our best if you're looking for information. But I think we also want to hear your own experiences during that 10 years of struggle. I'm not sure if, I really am not sure if we would all signed up, we would have stayed 10 years. I don't know about Barbara, I couldn't believe a war that terrible, that appalling, could go on that long. Every year we thought it was going to be the end. Okay?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I worked at the national level from 1965 on, and Fitzgerald. I worked at the national level, so I'm very familiar with what happened in the decision-making process. But I would really like to hear from people and what we did right, what we did wrong. People who were working at the local level or in other ways, if you have any comments on the national demonstrations and whether it was a good thing, whether it was a problem.
I worked on the April 24th demonstration and the May 1st demonstration, but the April 24th one in Washington, D.C. And I'm very interested in information because I don't have any context for what I did. Basically, at a national meeting, and I'd love to know what it was, I brought up a resolution that there should be high school students as a contingent at one of the demonstrations, the April 24th in Washington, D.C. Then I worked in the office after school, organizing these people, these high school students to come in. And someone, and her name was Kathy Huntley, was one who coordinated with me, and another man named Ted Solowski helped me and us, actually it became us after about a week or two, to do this. And I really love doing it. I mean, I don't want to take cog the time, I just want to say that what I found in this group was that it was a real sense of joy and community and hard work and everybody working together.
Things I wanted to say in response to what Dave said, that looking back on it, it was a wonderful time. There was a lot of energy, but at the time it was so frustrating, you know, no matter what we did, the war just kept going on and on and on. So when I started out in '65, anti-war movement was just beginning to get together. And over time it got bigger and bigger, but always there was this sense that we were in it together. We were working together for something that was really important, although I never felt good. It just was really, really hard. And yeah, as Dave said, who knew it was going to go on that long, and still feel so horrible that we weren't able to do anything that would stop it sooner. Of course, the Vietnamese, the ones that were working hard.
How many here were at the May Days? The May Days. I'll just share one memory from the May Days. I was terrified of what would happen at the May Days, but I didn't trust Randy Davis. And I remember going over, Gil Green from the Communist Party and I, who worked very closely together, were both afraid that Rennie might be setting us up, that he might be an agent, and And maybe the plan was to have a mass demonstration and provoke violence from the police that would really energize the movement. And I remember going over to Dave Dellinger for a talk one night about how reliable Rennie was. And at the end, of course, Rennie was fine. But there was fear about what would happen. And I was so afraid of the Maydays that I was trying hard to get arrested in the week of actions before the Maydays. So I would be in jail when the Maydays came. But of course I didn't have any luck, and I was there with William Gofford, and I locked arms to walk in the illegal march. And someone had said, don't run if they throw tear gas, walk. And that never made sense to me, and when the tear gas came out, William and I ran very wisely. But what was exciting about the Maydays to me, because already I was an older person, I wasn't a kid. The 1,000 people packed in on the third day that we were arrested, that was the third. There were 1, 2, 3, and the third day was when the rest of the leadership got arrested. The kids were incredible. They were incredible. They managed to set up a rock band out of nothing in the stadium. And it was an extraordinary experience for me to spend the 36 hours we had together with watching these kids, which were the youth of the 1960s, and very moving. So I learned a great deal out of the Maydays, even though I had tried to get arrested before they happened. Others who went through the Mayday experience? Yes. You have to come and get this. I'm not young enough to rush around with it.
Yes, I was a law student at the University of Chicago Law School when Mayday occurred, and my roommate and I decided to come here. My roommate was determined to get arrested, and he got arrested. I was determined to not get arrested because if you're going to be a lawyer, maybe it wasn't a good idea to have a record when you had to explain before the character committee your arrest records. And what I did instead is I went to Georgetown Law School Clinic, and they had forms to give me to go to where the people were in jail. And it was a big, at the RFK Stadium, there was a huge holding area where people were behind fences, thousands of people. And I had this little pocket transistor radio. And the little pocket transistor radio, they said, there have been thousands that have already been put back. So the first thing I did when I arrived there was that there were not enough forms. So we Xeroxed, so we had thousands of forms. We went to the jails, 12 to a cell that we were supposed to have one. Then I went to a press conference by the chief of police. His name was Jerry Wilson. And I said, none of these people are being fed. You've got to get sandwiches to the folks. And so they got sandwiches to feed the people. And of course, all of those people, Sylvester, were thrown out. Every single one of them in those 3 days were thrown out, as far as I can recall, because they were all illegal. The guy who wrote the memo was named William Rehnquist. He's head of the Office of Legal Counsel, and he said there was a right to implied martial law. And when there was a Supreme Court vacancy, President Nixon said, Haldeman and Ehrlichman said, get that guy, what's his name, Rensburg, who wrote that memo. I want to nominate him for the Supreme Court. So that's William Rehnquist, who had this law clerk a few years later by the name of John Roberts, who is now Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
I just was told that there are 2 other mics in the audience who share. I'm still liberated.
Hi, I'm Carol Cullum, and I lived in New Orleans during Kent State, and a friend of mine and I drove from New Orleans all night long to come up to the demonstration in Washington. And from that moment on, I realized this is something that we needed to do, that I needed to be a part of. And I went to a Quaker Studies Center in Pennsylvania, with George Willoughby, and then I came down and worked on the April 24th PCBJ and May Day. It was the most amazing experience. It was frustrating but wonderful. It was enlightening, and I didn't want to get arrested on the third day because I was scared and I was doing bail raising. But then I did get arrested on the fifth day when Ron Dellums and Bella and other people invited us to present the People's Peace Treaty. And of course they just, hit Dellums on the head and arrested us all. And that was an intense experience to be in the armory. And then I continued to work and, on demonstrations around Vietnam. And I would like to be a part of the work that's going on around fixing Vietnam and Agent Orange and helping without controlling. That's my fear in terms of corporate America getting into Vietnam and wanting to take a hold of it. I don't want that to happen, but I think that we can be a part of exchange.
I want to make one comment about food. There was a reference about sandwiches being brought in. I was in the third wave, so the third day. We had food brought into us from the black churches because they knew jail food was not very good. That was the first, and they thought we were crazy to be arrested. But always before, and I hadn't thought about this, the demonstrations came in the morning and we were on back to New York and Boston and Chicago by late afternoon. And that left the mess of tensions with the cops and the black community after we had safely left. When they saw our busloads of people going to be jailed, they were applauding us in the street, and they brought food to us even though they thought we were crazy. I think that's really a wonderful memory. Now, we've got several mics. I'm going to give it to Paul. I am not able to rush around, so if you don't have a mic, come up and get it, and you're on. But you're younger.
Barbara, I want to ask and David to reflect, to get your reflections on a couple of aspects, because of course I was involved the first March, April '65, but then which was maybe 25,000 people, but very quickly in the subsequent national mobilizations, it became an order of magnitude or several orders of magnitude much larger. So there's a management and coordination challenge that obviously came about. And then the second part of it is that for our first march, where we put it all together ourselves, SDS, we didn't face what must have been very challenging subsequently, that there were a lot of tendencies and a lot of disagreements about what were the right tactics and what should we wear and what should we say and what kind of flag should we wave and all those other issues that came about. But the principle that we were all in this together, that it was that there was everybody was welcome, was a principle that must have been extremely hard to maintain, but there must have been tensions around that as well. And if you could refresh our memories on how you managed those two, just first the order of magnitude, the fact that it was just so much larger each time than the previous time, and secondly, having an umbrella in which everybody could participate.
Yes, coalitions are difficult, really, really hard. Maybe you just get more used to the problems and put up with them. As to the order of magnitude, the locals, it was the local groups that made the demonstrations. It wasn't the national offices. They had to pull the people out. And I was looking back to the history of movement. And in the beginning, there weren't so many national demonstrations. They were local. The days are appointed, on this day, everybody do something. And I guess that was because we were still getting our footing. But as it grew larger, it's just a matter of logistics became harder. We changes to that, but that's easy. That's easier to deal with buses than with other people in movement. And I thought it was just amazing in the beginning. It was Dave Ellsberg, I believe, and A.J. Musty, who were the ones that insisted to see the Communist Party be involved, because there was a lot of people that were opposed to that. And then there's this wonderful story when, in 1966, I think, when I first was involved with some stuff at the New York Vietnam Peace Parade Committee, which was New York City, with the wonderful Norman Becker at the helm. But the discussion for the demonstration that was going to go down Fifth Avenue, which gave them their name, and this was a pretty good coalition of local groups, was should only one slogan would be allowed. No one could bring anything else. Only one banner, one placard, one slogan, one demand. And the question was, get out of Vietnam or get out of Vietnam now. And I mean, looking at the time, people, said getting out now was unrealistic. And people would think we were being unrealistic. Just the fact that we existed was unrealistic. So, well, Walter T was there with his NLF flag anyway. This is a New York City guy that was always bringing the NLF flag, which was a great consternation to a lot of people in the beginning. I guess the people got used to him. I thought he was I never knew that he really was people thought that Walter was an agent. He never got arrested. But all that made it more articulate.
I think I was upset about the NLF fight. The bigger picture, which bigger picture? Yeah, I am one of those who was not so innocent, because in the very beginning, when Norma Becker, who was one of the great figures of the Vietnam period, not here, but was a major figure, never made speeches, never wrote articles, but did the work. And she launched the Fifth Avenue Peace Parade Committee, and with A.J. Musty, and then she kept it going. And I had doubts about it because my old left anti-communism made me really hesitant about that on me. In the end, as time went on, I became a very close friend of Bill Green from the Communist Party, and we worked together very closely to the end. There were two problems that I know of at the national level. One of them was, and I had nothing to do with setting up this conference, by the way. One of them was the Socialist Workers' Party, which did break from the main coalition in 1971, I think. And there was a lot of hard feeling about that, but I want to say that one of my friends that I worked with was Fred Holtzman from the Socialist Workers' Party. He wrote the first book about the Vietnam movement called Out Now. And there was tension with Rennie Davis and the Yippies because their politics were very young and they were very different. And I came close to blows at one meeting when they were attacking Gil Green, which I thought was outrageous. So there were these tensions, but those conferences took us 3 days. We would start Friday, go Saturday, and go Sunday. And we always wondered when the blow-up would come. If it came early, we would be able to get through okay. But if it came on the last day, we had problems. And one of the problems, of course, was that there were agents. And it's not always easy to tell the difference between the far left and the agents. So there were always problems. We never had a simple one-day meeting and went home. We had 3-day meetings, a lot of hard feeling, and we stuck it out. And I just don't, each of us thought that that demonstration would be the last one. The war couldn't keep going.
I just add something, the importance of individual, Denver years ago, whatever. We were lucky, because the nature of that time, I don't know if this is ever going to get replicated, that people like William Sloane Coffin and Ben Spock played, people like William Sloane Coffin and Ben Spock played a crucial role at times in influencing the way things are going to go. And when we decided to do some civil disobedience in October '67 at the Pentagon, there was a huge problem, like with Women's Right for Peace, and they were that wonderful group. Their politics didn't include doing things like civil disobedience. So we had the plan was to start at the memorial, and then the people who wanted to go to the Pentagon could go, and they didn't need to even get arrested if they didn't want to. And it was Ben Spock that really had stepped up and convinced the others, this is going to be fine, and it was.
Well, I can't really apologize for Abby Holtzman because he's passed on. But I can't speak for myself, so if I created any tension in our coalition, I'd like to apologize now. So I also want to just remind everybody, I think we all know that it actually was this weekend, okay, 44 years ago. After the big mobilization, after the vets, I had the very good fortune to speak to a group of people that were ready to be arrested. I stepped out, it was Saturday, today, okay? I stepped out and looked out at 100,000 people and the Beach Boys. Still today I'm shocked. The Beach Boys showed up for this event. And it was the largest arrest in American history. And in the history of the Vietnam movement, it sort of came and went. But recently I have had a chance to go back to Vietnam several times. And it actually, the May Day event is really big in Vietnam, It's just, an attempt to pick 24 targets and actually go into the roads and bridges and shut them down, so we did, our logistics weren't that great, and quite honestly, we were in churches like this, and it was just impossible to sleep, so quite honestly, pretty much everybody was in the streets by 6 in the morning, The Marines had been called in, they were on the ball, every single one of our sites was taken. So there were a lot of people weren't arrested, they were just pincher actions by the police that drove people right out of the city. But still, it was really impactful and not to be forgotten. What I would like to say here is that I have one claim to fame that lets me make this statement. Okay, and I know it's a little strange, but in January 1960, there was no one who saw millions and millions and millions and millions of people in their 20s would turn out and try to change the world. So my claim to fame, I was a student at Oakland College at the time, and I was running around telling all my friends, thousands of students are going to come. We're a generation. We're going to do this, and I don't know. If anybody believes in intuition, I had intuition, okay, and my intuition was correct. I mean, I wasn't psychic except for 30 days because on February 1st, 1960, it was all started, with Greensboro, North Carolina. But I have an intuition today. So I have more authority now to speak about this. We are coming back. We are going to do this again. We are the largest constituency for social change in the history of the world, and we are here right now in this country and around the world. Okay, yeah, we're under the radar, but we were under the radar on January 1962, and we did it then. And the big thing that's going to drive us this time is events. Okay, events are going to pull us out of our little houses and realize that we have each other, and we we are not going to basically be the generation to be remembered as setting the table for humanity's last supper. You know, we're going to really, we shall not perish from the earth, you know, will be our call. So just remember, I made my prophecy, and there it is. Thanks.
Somebody holding the mic would like to make a comment. I first got involved in the movement in the mobilization against the war in October 1969. And I've generally been active ever since then. Peace to Central America, to the environment. And one thing I think that is never mentioned enough is the use of humor. And also, I was out in the wilds of Missouri, so we didn't get into, we didn't really get all that much into the big demonstrations in Washington, D.C. One thing that I think is very interesting and very vital in activism is a sense of humor. And also a sense of holding your opponents up to ridicule and making fun of them in a way. And using humor as a political tool, I think it's one of the most ferocious tools you can have. And also, a lot of these activities that you're involved in should have an element of fun to them, I think. You know, and that's just my impressions from my own activity, you know. And I think one of the greatest examples of it was during the Kent State demonstrations at my university. The administration practically banned everybody from being in a group of like 3 people or more. And so the dean of students came out on this big portico overlooking our demonstration, and he essentially looked down on us like, "Okay, children, go home." And a guy that was sitting next to me had a moment of genius. It looked like it was threatening rain. A lot of people brought umbrellas. And he stood up with the umbrella pointed at the dean of students, and he said, the dean of students' name was Jack Matthews. He pointed the umbrella up at him and he said, "Jump, Jack, jump." And all of a sudden, a wave of 500 umbrellas came up to the chant of "Jump, Jack, jump, jump, Jack, jump." And this guy turned as beet red as you could, stormed back into the administration building and retired that summer. But that was a thing of somebody really having some creative thought and using humor that totally disarmed the administration at our university. And that's my 2 bits.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, David. My name is Judy Gilbo, and I just wanted to speak to follow what Ray just said about the use of humor. I'm also, you know, wasn't there. I didn't see what happened with you and Abby or Jerry or Stu, but I'm wondering if you rethink it, if they were simply just trying to inject a little humor into what was, I'm sure, a very serious discussion. I remember when Stu and I were going to a meeting, I don't know if it was this one, it was another one, we got stopped by some cops on the way to the meeting, and the cop said, "What are you doing?" And Stu said, "I'm going to join the Communist Party." And that was part of the way we did things. So I think that the message of this entire conference is that we need to move on from divisions and hurts of the past and really seize the time about creating a new narrative to counter the dominant paradigm that's coming out that we're talking, that is so much part of what people are saying about the war that we know is not true. So I'm delighted really to see both of you, and you know, let's let the spirits of Stu and Abby and Jerry and Anita, let's let them in and have a little fun too.
Hello, my name is Michael Trobin, and I was there at the PJ meetings when we scared the crap out of you. Not only did Rennie come, but he brought his friends, and we were less than clean. And we didn't applaud for the pacifists, and we were a little crazy.
If you guys are going to use the microphone, we're going to have to stop our workshop.
We didn't know.
Can't you get together and talk? Okay, should we go out? Maybe we'll go outside.
Yes, I understand that. This is the first way we're in.
Okay, I'm trying not to yell. All right.
People stand up as well. I mean, we have to stand up and turn around and help everyone.
All right. Well, I do remember those days a lot. I remember April the 24th was another big march. We see PJ got involved with and at the end of the march, National Peace Act that historically at the end of that, there was no energy left in the room. That the only thing going after that is the start of this course of the camp in Western Park and the fence area through the middle of the fence. And the energy started to build. And through that we built up the energy. And at that moment, there was almost like, it was an explosion out of the street. And I was with you, my pleasure. You had this idea of civil disobedience. You would sit down in the street, you would wait for the policemen to come, we would smile at the policemen, they would arrest us, and we felt good. We had a different idea. We were going to cause service, action. We loved it when the police came. We wanted to stick around, we were going to dump the garbage in the middle of the street and move on to the next thing. And for 6 hours, we made them run their little tushy. But the energy that they created kept a lot of the energy from being there. It was a very positive energy event, as opposed to some of these marches that just ended up.
Okay, my name's Howard Zinn. I'm a veteran of the war and peace movement. I worked on job 5 years when I was involved in the title of this meeting, I think, is supposed to be teaching the Vietnam War and movement. I think the most difficult part of teaching the Vietnam War is to explain that the people we were fighting over there were the good guys. And I had the privilege 8 years ago going back on the 40th anniversary of that offensive, toured Vietnam, best food in the world, we were welcome everywhere, stayed in the home of a woman whose father had walked the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Saigon. After this, people had been killed because our invasion was very lethal, but ultimately ineffective. These people were fighting for their own country, and we were on the wrong side of that battle. And that's the one thing that you never hear in any discussion of the war in Vietnam is not that the war is bad and peace is good. That's good. We were on the wrong side. The other guys over there were patriots. And that's the hardest thing we will need to teach when we teach this war, that we fought on the wrong side of that war. And the other people who won the war and are now in charge of the country are doing quite well. That narrative just doesn't get through in any discussion of this war.
Ted Lieberman, North Star Productions. I was wondering if either of you or anybody else here, since part of the purpose here is learning lessons of the war and the about mass protest, which is wonderful if you got the mass media behind you in the old days especially. I grew up on a military bases here in Vietnam, Marine Corps bases. There were no protests on bases. All the media was controlled on the base. If a song came out against the Vietnam War, or somebody like Gary Puckett, instantly, no more records by Gary Puckett on the radio station. There was that mentality of counterculture and culture. They looked at themselves as an oasis of selflessness, devotion, of selfishness. And those people out there, those protesters at the gate of the base, they're counterculture. But often, those small protests were the only protests we ever saw in the military base, because back in those days, TV, you had to have an antenna, and as strong as your station was, is how far a signal could carry it. If you were out in the middle of nowhere in the military base, you didn't get any of the huge mass protests. And let's face it, even the media didn't always cover it. And what I wanted to make about change, talk about change of strategy, a frightening awareness that some things haven't changed. I was in the Occupy movement. I don't know if many people remember S7, it was J27. J20. The Supreme Court over here said, you can't protest in front of the Supreme Court anymore. And they put this bronze fence around it. We showed up, told them, we have the right to protest in front of the Supreme Court, and they disagreed. So we tore that fence down. We tore it to shreds, and we protested on the steps, and then we left 20 minutes later. That didn't end up in any of the major media. And here we are in an age with satellites and telecommunications and cell phone cameras and all of that stuff. And so when you talk about strategy, when I was a boy, the most effective way that I knew what was going on in the outside world was a small group of protesters who used to get in their cars, these old Rambler station wagons. They go out in the desert and get to the gate of the military base, and I actually got to see protests during the 60s. So strategy is interesting. Mass protest is great, like we did at the Supreme Court. But if only Huffington Post shows up, or Reuters, and they only take a picture of the police arresting a protester, you don't see that bronze gate being torn to shreds and us standing there going, yay, we're protesting in front of the Supreme Court.
By the way, I get my name before Stephen Spitz. I wanted to answer the question from my perspective of growing up in Chicago, being at the Chicago Convention in '68, being at the first teach-in at the University of Michigan in March of '65, being here in May 71, but also being in the first year of law school. During my first year of law school, in '69, '70, and she's not in the room with me. Bernadine Dohrn, who was also ironically a graduate of my law school, University of Chicago Law School, was talking about, it seemed like it was every other day, about the latest bombing. And the days of rage took place in October '69. I talked to a lot of African Americans around that time. The premise was that if you trashed a bunch of cars and broke some windows, somehow that would generate an uprising in the African American community. Well, folks in the African American community were ridiculing these rich white kids acting out. And the general public was saying, that was really undercutting all the very significant, powerful demonstrations and, including May Day, including the teaching movement, including the giant rallies, and all the discussions that generated. That was successful, but was not helpful, and I think was a serious, both strategic and tactical mistake, is to engage in those acts of violence that really detracted from the main message and undermined, I think, the main message. That's my point of view. I just thought it was right.
I was going to actually comment on that too. First of all, we can't hear you. Just like this, I didn't think we should have gone to Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968. Everybody knew it was going to be a war. We can't use the microphone.
You can use it if you speak softly with a big stick.
We can't hear you at all.
If you use the microphone a little bit, I don't think it would be.
You can also move up.
Even if you stood,
We can turn the speakers off in the back. It just makes it fun.
But there were people, and I think Stuart Beecham was long gone, but was very important. Quaker was very good on understanding where the American people, not where we were enraged and driven mad, but where the American people. And he was one of those who thought of the festival we had at one of the large demonstrations. And the kids who organized this, by the way, Marge and the others, who were in the moratorium, they had a much less militant idea, a very simple idea, that people everywhere in the country could, on a certain day, come out and stand in the public square and light candles. And that captured the imagination of Light magazine, and it made visible to the government that the majority of Americans were on our side. We didn't think about it. It was the younger group, the less radical group around the moratorium who thought of that and did it. So I think that was one of the mistakes that some of us made. I think, look, if you didn't make mistakes, you weren't there.
Anybody else that has a question?
I think a main mistake was that after the war was on, we left. That's what Tom Hayden said. And I think that we really do need to come together. We need to make a new movement or continue to use it going on. And I was thinking about what we were talking about earlier about our generation moving back. I think that some people have retired and have time and have the economic support. And it's a question of simply making a decision, moving and taking action and finding each other and working together. And I truly hope this conference makes that happen more than it has until now.
My name is Judith Smith. I want to follow on what she said, which is that it took me decades to realize this, but censorship in America and major media isn't necessarily twisting the stories. It's not putting the story in the paper and in the media in the first place. Just in the past few weeks, I've seen two major events occur here in D.C. that didn't get a word in the Washington Post. One was the Armenian genocide, 100th anniversary in front of the Turkish embassy. Thousands of Turks were there. 1,000 Armenians were there, screaming back and forth at one another. This is the 100th anniversary of the genocide. Not a word in the Post about that demonstration. A week before, there was the marchers who came from Staten Island to Washington, D.C. 100 marchers for Black Lives Matter. They arrived at the west side of the Capitol building. Danny Glover spoke. Half of the Congressional Black Caucus spoke. Keith Ellison, John Lewis, Barbara Lee, and also about a dozen of the families who had their relatives killed by the police spoke. It was just tearing your heart apart. To me, it was a really historical event, and 500 people there had not a word in the Post the next day. And I realized that the gigantic demonstrations I've seen held in D.C. with 10,000 to 100,000 people in the past decades, and not a word gets in the Post the next day. And so I think we ought to be really aware that what we do doesn't necessarily get any newsprint. We have to create the newsprint. We have to create the media like Democracy Now! And so on. Another thing I'd like to bring up is that I feel bad that at the beginning of this conference that we did not primarily honor the Vietnamese and the Laotians and the Cambodians. We went through a lot of troubles in the anti-war movement. I lost my job in the State Department. I've been a lot of telephone threats against me. I had them gunning for me. But all of this is irrelevant compared to the suffering that we caused in Vietnam. And as you said, they were the patriots. I was raised with the American ideal that we fought off the British, we fought off that imperialist empire in 1776. So I thought, well, of course, we believe that every people should have independence in their country, should fight off imperialist control. And yet, we supported a single liberation movement since World War II in Africa or Asia or anywhere, even given our tradition in 1776. I don't know of it, and it's really sad that this is the kind of country we're in.
Short thing to say, and that is, in terms of what we did wrong, a lot of times when we tell people to come to D.C., come to these demonstrations, we say, we're going to go back to
have kids really living their lives in the bank, and you have people who can't find housing. You have people in the street everywhere. And there is a breaking point. And the one good thing the occupied did many things, but the one brilliant thing is they gave us sort of 99% and 1%. And there is, I think, a range felt not just by us, we're all trapped in a sense, but by the young people in the streets in Ferguson and elsewhere. These are kids who are all over the country. It wasn't just in Ferguson. There were demonstrations where they weren't just black kids. There's a new energy there which involves the young. And nothing is going to happen if we depend on us. But we can give support to them. And I hope we can have a broader look than just ending the Iraq War. I think we need to argue for ending a system which really needs the Iraq War and needs Vietnam. And I think we haven't really done yet with that. I'm hoping that there will be something really new coming out of the energy I sense around the country. We have about 10 minutes.
How many Facebook page or you don't have
I'm on Facebook, but I don't understand Twitter.
In regards to the last comment, I'm just starting to read a book by Gerald Horne, who is here. I met him this afternoon. A book called The Counter-Revolution of 1776. He makes an argument which suddenly helps me to understand things which I've been mystified by all my life. How could Thomas Jefferson have said all men are created equal, all people, and not only all people, but all children as slaves? Horne says that the Civil War was not the first war we fought for the preservation of slavery. That our revolution in 1776 was fought by slave owners for the preservation of slavery. And the slave owners, particularly in Virginia, the ones who became our first string of presidents, saw abolitionism growing in the British Empire and realized they needed to get us out of the British Empire before abolitionism swept the English-speaking world. That's the reason that George Washington, the slave owner, led us in battle against the British. And that was the reason that Robert E. Lee led the South to fight to get out of the war. That the very foundation of this country is based on slavery. And that is that's the sort of underlying theme of Congress today. It's the Tea Party, it's the Republican Party, that our foundation of a nation on this continent, or the institution of slavery, is still haunting us to this day.
Since we're almost out of time, I'd like to see if we can end with an answer to this question. We talked a lot about what we brought movement and the individual factions did wrong. But what did you both and anyone else think we did right?
One the 60s because it's a way of getting people involved. Sometimes members will get lost in the same hall. They have to go out and say, so we're also very determined to resolve the process.
Yeah, there was a sense of total exhaustion of the war, and people like Grace Haley had stopped writing. She worked for 10 years on the movement. And I think all across the country, people were burned out, and we didn't know what to do, and global was fine. I think one of the things that did happen, I know that the War Resistance League launched kind of a continental walk in 1976 to try to get people acting on disarmament and social justice. And local groups were reorganized, and Norma Becker and Sid Lenz and others helped bring about mobilization for survival, which was able to respond to the new issues of the danger of nuclear war and to link to the European movement. I mean, it's just so long ago you forgot END, European nuclear disarmament. But there was an exhaustion, and I think some credit should go to the groups that say they reorganized and started the campaigns, which are now so long ago we've forgotten them, and it's time for the next round of organization.